I'm using my golf clap, Mr. Carter, like my name is Scottie Scheffler. The
Blake, it is kind of weird because I work with a golf company, but I have never really played golf before. But shout out to the most boring golfer of all time winning it all, Scottie Scheffler. I needed one of the live guys to win. I needed something new, but boring Scottie Scheffler wins it all. My goodness gracious.
He looks like, because he did go to the University of Texas, he is the poster child of what the white man at the University of Texas is supposed to look like. Am I lying?
Yeah. I mean, look, no. I thought the story with his wife was very interesting. And look, if he is truly transcendent, and he doesn't have a big personality,
number one golfer in the world, man. He lets us play do the talking.
Well, the key is going to be getting a good nickname, right? Because Jack Nicklaus wasn't the absolute most interesting guy, but he was the Golden Bear. So. Scottie,
I see when you got a name like Scottie, though, Scottie could just be like a first name. Like, hey, if you're having like a golf conversation, like, dude, Scottie, right. like Tiger's a one-word name. Scottie could be this exact same way. I don't know if he needs a nickname. I just think that the Chef Man. Oh, I like that. The Chef Man. How about that? That's a nickname. The Chef Man.
Yeah. What's cooking, man? You see, that's what Scottie needs to do every time he makes a putt.
He just needs to call me. He just needs to call me, and I will make this for him. But very, very fun Masters weekend. But I will tell you, I do think UFC 300 won the weekend. I'm going to be talking about that later on. Yeah. But, Carter, you're here tonight to talk about the LSU spring game and what you saw. Let me not sugarcoat it. Let me not just, bounce this around. Pause. But let's get right down to brass tacks here. I have a big problem. Can I tell you what it is? I'm not going to say, look, BK knows more what's going on in the program than I ever will, clearly. But he said after the spring game, after the defense had some struggles, that, and this is per quote, that we were very vanilla on defense. Well, I have a problem with that because how are you so vanilla on defense and you had 2 blown coverages? So if you're vanilla, that makes this worse. If you are running some exotic type stuff and then blown coverage and be like, all right, they just throwing shit at the wall and see what's going to stick. But when you're that vanilla and that base and you have 2 blown coverages, Carter, I don't care what anybody tells you. Now we're starting to see a personnel issue, not necessarily a coaching issue.
Yeah, Blake. So I was actually at the spring game, and first off, shout out to everyone that said they listen to this segment every Monday.
Number one player in the country, Bryce Underwood.
Yeah. So actually, I've not been watching the WNBA draft. I've actually been editing my interview with Bryce Underwood that will air tomorrow on Power Hour LSU. So really, Bryce and his dad. His dad is actually like one of the most interesting guys I've ever spoken to in any interview. But yeah, really excited for everyone to see that. So just to give you a little behind the scenes, part of why I go to the games, Blake, is so I can speak to these kinds of people. I just introduced myself and they were very gracious with their time, but also, as you know, shake hands with people that, you can't shake hands with through the TV. So my biggest takeaway from the spring game is I feel a lot more comfortable about Bryce Underwood being an LSU Tiger. So he is locked in. Family is planning to move to Baton Rouge. That was something that Jay shared with us. So, and Jay being his dad. So I'm really excited about that. I'm also really excited about hearing the coaches. That was something I wanted to see is how everyone is doing, transitioning to their new roles, especially on the defensive side of the football. Everyone that I speak to says that they're really excited about that. But what everyone saw was the actual play. And I'm with you, Blake. The blown coverages are one thing, but what was very interesting to me, Blake, wasn't just that guys are running open for deep touchdown passes, is there was on both of those plays another guy wide open that would have scored a touchdown if Garrett Nussmeier would have thrown in a different direction, right? So on the Zavion Thomas deep touchdown throw, Aaron Anderson would have walked in for a touchdown as well if he would have thrown in that direction. If he didn't throw to Kyren Lacey, he would have hit Mason Taylor over the middle. And while it wouldn't have been a touchdown, it would have been at least a 30 to 40-yard gain. So, Blake, it's not just the blown coverages. It's just everybody was running wide open on those deep passing concepts, and that is definitely not what LSU wants to see.
What do you make of that happening? What was the problem in your estimation? Because, look, I got in these arguments, and me and you went through the all-22 last night. I'm going to just take people through a little bit of what we do here. But the Kyren Lacey, everybody's like, it was cover 3. BK said it was cover 3. Well, if it was cover 3, okay, well, then somebody forgot to tell the other corner and safety who are running cover 2. Right?
Yeah.
And so he said it's cover 3. No, it's not. Like, we have the footage, and you and I go through it. It is not cover 3. It is a cover 2, and Sage doesn't get over there. It is what it is. I don't care who blew the coverage, but that's my point. I don't give a shit who blows the coverage, because if you're that vanilla, you blew it. What did you see of why they blew those 2 coverages?
Yeah, so I'll push back just a little bit, Blake, on the cover 3, cover 2 thing. I do agree with you. It did look like, with the safety splitting out the way that he did, it did look like 2. But honestly, and this goes for even –
we don't know the play call.
Yeah, you don't know the call. Like, it's hard to ever definitively say it was this or that.
You had to make an assumption of what they ran.
Right.
That's how I go about it. I don't know.
Okay.
I'm just making an assumption.
Yeah.
You got 2 safeties going out. You have 2 safeties at 10 yards and close to the line of scrimmage. Well, Carter, I mean, that's as base cover 2 as you can get. It's not like PJ Woodland and Ashton Stamps both blew the coverage.
Yeah, Blake, honestly, if the coverages are blown that poorly, I normally put that more on the safeties than the corner more often than not when I see coverages that are blown. Well, it's because the safety is oftentimes making calls back there and getting people aligned. And normally, if there are blown coverages, at the end of plays, one thing, and this is something that bothered me, but if there's blown coverages and guys are walking into the end zone, I like it when a secondary immediately starts looking at this direction or that direction. But after both the plays, the secondary was like, didn't act like nothing happened, right? Normally, you know what I'm talking about?
Like they got beat.
Yeah. And I was like, that's kind of bizarre, right? But it's honestly very hard to definitively say one way or the other, Blake, because the coverages did look very, very, very bizarre in how they were blown just by where the safeties were. And what happens, Blake, sometimes when there are 2 people running wide open, as there were on both plays, the other guy that's running wide open affects the wide openness of the other guy. Right. So let's say the first one is Zavion Thomas.
You think Sage Ryan was going to Aaron Anderson?
Yeah. So Sage was running over the top to help because he saw that Zavion Thomas was wide open. And he then turned and ran towards Aaron Anderson because he also saw Aaron Anderson was wide open. And Jordan Gilbert actually kind of sort of did the same thing. And they were both trying to fix an error when secondaries and how pass defenses normally work is you just got to do your job. So the bottom line is the jobs weren't done. And the bottom line, Blake, is the LSU secondary had another tough spring game. And hopefully that changes. It did do some good things, but ultimately it's just rough when you see those things happen.
All right, let's talk about some good things that they did. Would you like? I mean, I think PJ Woodland showed all 165 pounds of him that he can play here. Carter, I'm just still a little worried about them on the boundary, if I'm being honest. I mean, I think PJ can be fine, but look, you still had a quarterback go 7 for 7 and just go off on you. I mean, like, it's not as if that, like, you still got to play Jackson Dart. You still got to play Miller Moss. You still got to play, I know people don't like this, but Jalen Milroe. But there are a lot of dudes that you got to play that you just can't do some of the things that you did against them and think that it's going to be corrected. But what are some good things that you saw?
And on top of that, Connor Wigman and the huge upgrade they had at their OC with Colin Klein coming over from Kansas State, and remember we went up against him just a few years ago. But I got to be honest with you, Blake. As far as positives are concerned, I thought Harold Perkins did some really good things at linebacker. My favorite defensive play of the game was him taking Will Campbell head on in the hole. That showed me physicalness. It showed me toughness. It also showed me selflessness, because him taking on Will Campbell in the hole allowed Greg Penn to go make the tackle on Josh Williams. The problem is Greg Penn did not make the tackle.
Right. And you know what? That would have set the tone for the whole day.
Yes.
And that was the first play. Harold did exactly what he needed to do for that play to be successful.
Yeah, you're right. It was one of the first plays, and man, that showed me a lot from Perk. Obviously, the linebackers. We'll see how they develop. Blake, you've been hammering this. I think everyone knows at this point defensive tackle is an issue. But you did have some very interesting performances at defensive end, in particular Gabriel Relaford and Paris Shand, even though those were against the backups. Blake, offensively, two guys really stood out to me. I thought both running backs, Caleb Jackson and Josh Williams, played really well. But these two players really did a lot of things right. One of those was Zavion Thomas. He plays like he is shot out of a cannon. And, Brian Kelly mentioned in the post-game press conference, once everything gets settled down for him and once he really understands the nuance of all the different positions, he is going to be a big-time player for LSU next year. And the next guy is Mason Taylor. Just a phenomenal game. He had the big block on Harold Perkins to give Caleb Jackson the touchdown run on the counter. And, he just got open. He looked better as a receiver. So those two guys in particular, Kamarion Pipton as well, it was a mostly good day for most of the LSU offensive players.
All right, I'm going to take that line by line. You start off with the defensive tackles. I hate to go back negative before I go positive, but it's the order you went in. Carter, I started covering this team in 2017. Okay. There is no position group that I can remember being this bad. I just look, it's something that I've been hammering home all spring, and people have kind of just laughed me off. To some people have, right? And people thought that I was over-exaggerating when I said Josh Williams, Caleb Jackson, Carter, they're running wide open. They're running free. And what we saw, which I'm going to get back to about this running game that I love, and yes, it's an eye roll. Yeah. But I just don't – like, they're going to have to get three, Carter. Like, they're going to – I don't know if Paez is one of the three that they want to get. Carter, the portal's opening tomorrow. And if you have any realistic shot, which I do think that you can if you do this, you're two defensive tackles away from making a playoff. It's that simple. You're just not good enough there. I think that they're the worst unit. I know that you'll probably push back on maybe like a 2020 O-line, but that team had three guys drafted. Like, three guys got drafted on that team. Carter, nobody in that interior defensive line right now will get drafted. Much less, maybe one of them is an undrafted free agent.
Yeah, no, it's a tough group. It really, really, really is, and it's gonna take a lot of change. And ultimately, the big issue is there's just not a lot of good DTs in the portal
right now.
Yeah, right now. I just don't know how many are actually going to get in there. If you know that every other team is after defensive tackles. It's been reported.
Bama wants to, after what happened to them on Saturday. Georgia wants another one. I mean, you're going to have to go out and spend money. That's just the bottom line.
Yeah, and, I was fortunate to talk to one in the portal earlier this week, and, he's going through a ton of visits. I mean, he is making a lot of visits, and, he's not necessarily the second coming of Glenn Dorsey, and he's getting recruited by every single big name school that's out there. So it's going to be interesting, Blake. They've got to go find some portal guys, but it's just a simple supply and demand thing. There's not a whole lot of supply and there's a lot of demand. So it's going to take, writing a check potentially for one of the better names that are in there.
I hate saying that about them because there's people that are really I really like that are in that room as
Yeah.
people. But I mean, Carter, I can't come out here and sugarcoat it anymore. I mean, like they performed and have performed all spring that poorly. And I do think that they thought Mason Smith was coming back. And I think that's why they didn't address it sooner. And when Mason said in the 12th hour or 11th hour, I'm not coming back, it really shocked them. I really do believe that to my heart of hearts. All right, number 2.
No.
You said Harold Perkins. I agree with you. And see, I don't want to make an ultimate determination because the guys in front of him, those DTs are so bad. But man, when Will Campbell was bearing down, he made the play he needed to. I thought he looked better than we've ever seen him in the interior at inside backer.
Yeah, it's just going to be learning every nuance of that position. And honestly, like he has said in interviews, patience, right? This isn't a position where you could just fly down and make every single play. You got to go through your reads and progressions. And I think he's going to be a good player for LSU next year.
What'd you make of the play that he had? I think it was either against Zavion Thomas or Aaron Anderson. They ran a little bubble screen. The motion comes in and then the screen. He goes in there and makes the TFL. What'd you make of seeing him go from the inside, run that all the way down, and make the play?
Yeah, there are quite a few people that want him and Weeks to be the starters. I do think that gives him the most athletic upside. But ultimately, let's just take Perk out of the equation, right? He also had a good play on Josh. That linebacker room also needs to be a little bit deeper, right? And I'm crossing my fingers because this kid gave me the best interview I've ever given a recruit. And I love my Bryce Underwood interview that's coming out tomorrow. But Xavier Atkins moved my soul with some of the things that he shared about his life story and all of that. I hope there's a youngster. Maybe it's him. Maybe it's someone else.
Kylin
Singleton. Someone else that we also interviewed. Hopefully it's one of those guys that could be a younger guy that can help out. Because I know there's so much focus on the secondary, Blake, and the defensive tackle room. I am not overly comfortable with the overall depth of that group either. I do think they need one other guy to step up and be a bona fide guy, kind of like Weeks was last year for LSU.
So you're saying depth from just a quality standpoint and see what we have. You're not numbers wise. I mean, because they got numbers there, but you're just
I'm just talking about someone because I've heard good things about Wes Weeks during this offseason, and he's not really played a whole lot his first couple years at LSU.
Right.
So can he be that guy? It could be him. But ultimately, Blake, they've really have to have better safety play. It's a non-negotiable. And yeah, I know everyone wants to put it on Sage Ryan once again. We're not in that meeting room or whatever. It's just got to be better, and hopefully it is when the season comes around.
What'd you make of Colin Jackson's day?
Yeah, he's really good, Blake. And look, it's been a lot of like off the field kinds of things, what Brian Kelly has said in press conferences, and he was asked directly about Kylin after this game, and it's not off the field like bad stuff; it's just growing.
Like, hey, you can't bring your chains out on the field,
right?
Stuff like that, right?
I think Kylin's really good. I do. I don't know if I would call him like special, but I had a year 2 grade on him, which means year 2 he's ready to play in the SEC. So it didn't necessarily shock me, Blake, that he did some good things and had that really good play versus Shelton in the red zone. But I really would like to see him get some run next year.
I think at minimum they're going to have to start like BK's going to have to come off the older guy experience thing. He's just like he doesn't, and that's what he leans on. He's got to come off of it because, look, I like Major Burns, and I actually thought Major Burns in that star position made 3 big time plays. The PBU on Garrett Nussmeier, he tricked Garrett into throwing the football. BK walked through that in this press conference. He thought it was the best. And that was the thing that Brian Kelly talked about with Major. Like Major, he talked about how he psyched out Garrett Nussmeier, played a little cat and mouse with him, and got the PBU. He had 2 tackles at the line of scrimmage that were really nice. maybe he has come around, but you know what? He did not get beat. Name one time that you saw him in coverage. I mean, in an actual, like they're throwing the ball at him. That's what teams did last year. They attacked him. They didn't go at him. I do think him coming down the line of scrimmage is a lot better. Now, Kylin Singleton's a guy that I just don't know from a physical standpoint, Carter, that you can keep off the field. I really don't, because he is better than what you have right now.
Yeah, I'm with you, Blake. And, one more thing I would say defensively is I still think McBride is going to be the best defensive player in this class. So
I do too.
I'm really excited.
Number one overall player in the state, and I got laughed at.
Yeah, I got there too. I mean, I really do think he's the best defensive player in this class, and hopefully number 10, even though it wasn't like the most highlight worthy play, I'm going to stick with my guns here, and I think eventually he will start a game next year for LSU.
All right, let's go over to the offense. We've gone about 20 minutes before we've mentioned Garrett Nussmeier. Your thoughts on his performance? Well, let me lead off with this. Let's start with the first part and then talk about the scrimmage part. Carter, he didn't look good in the red zone, and that's an area that you and I discussed last week. Remember, we talked last week in reference to, I was like, man, he's got to get better under center. He's got to do some different. Like I was still high on him, and I still kind of am high on him to some extent. I am.
Yeah.
But in the red zone, Carter, I haven't seen him throw a touchdown all spring. And he got 12 plays in the red zone. Carter, the only time that LSU scored was running the football. And he missed Chris Hilton. He missed Kyren Lacey twice. He missed C.J. Daniels. And so you're talking about 12 plays where you got 4 or 5 passes, and you're 0 for 5. So I look at that and say, what did you make of his red zone to start off? Even though let me say this before I stop. He won the day. He won the day. So I am just trying to break down everything that he did, not just one specific thing.
Yeah, it wasn't his best performance
at all.
So actually, I know you want to move on to offense, but I'm going to make one more defensive point. Okay. This is why safety was the lowest graded position for me on defense. All right. You have to make touchdown saving tackles for all those reasons you just gave, because and what a touchdown saving tackle is basically bringing a guy down before he scores, right? If they give a 50, 60-yard gain, sure, that happens, but run them down. If you got a horse collar, do whatever, and you're not going to do that in a spring game, whatever. But that's why those stats that you just gave, you want to force other teams to convert in the red zone. And a lot of the DBs that came back from last year's team on this year's team, they struggled to do that again on Saturday. So that's why you got to make teams convert in the red zone. And Garrett Nussmeier as a red zone quarterback, Blake, he's had issues. He's had interception issues. He's had conversion issues when he's played in the past. But overall, he did look sharp. He did look in command of the offense. He does also have the benefit of not getting hit, but not only not getting hit, he had pristine pass protection. The guys up front did a really good job of protecting for him, and if guys are running wide open, you would like to see him make those throws. Now, he did have a really good throw on a 2nd and long to Mason Taylor on his upfield shoulder to make it a 3rd and manageable. That I thought was really, really impressive. So overall, a really good day for Garrett Nussmeier, and he furthers the distance between him and the next quarterback.
Oh, God, heavens, yes. I mean, heavens, yes.
Yeah.
Let's get to him and the overall scrimmage. Your thoughts on just how, look, he was perfect. He was 7 for 7. He had 180-plus yards and 2 touchdowns. I mean, Carter, he cannot be better than he was on Saturday.
Yeah, and even though the red zone portion was tough, you could just see he's just in command of everything. Mm-hmm. I thought his play speed was very impressive. And honestly, I think when you look at the QB hierarchy in the SEC, he's got to be in pretty much everyone's top 5. And it's a really good SEC QB year next year, even though there's a bunch of first-time, full-time starters. So I think Garrett's going to be ready to go, and I think this offense that surrounds him is going to be really, really, really good.
All right. Look, I do think that him and Kyren, because look, they got a lot of reps together. I know Kyren was the number 3 last year, but they still got a lot of reps together last year.
Absolutely.
It's benefiting them. And, I think that he's starting to form a connection with CJ Daniels. Your thoughts on the connection that him and Kyren Lacey have right now?
Yeah, it's pretty elite. And Kyren has a chance to really have a single season that is truly special. Now, you look at the SEC hierarchy of receivers. I put him firmly in the top 5, top 10 range right now, and it's once again another good year for SEC receivers. Next year with Barry and Brown, Trey Harris, and so on and so on. So I really like Kyren going into next year, and I just go back to me, and I'm just going to stick to my guns here. Zavion Thomas, man. Once everything just gets under wraps for him, he is going to give them a yak option that is going to be truly spectacular. So I'm really excited to see how he grows. I was excited to see Aaron Anderson take a step forward in his game as well. And CJ Daniels did some really good things. So overall, the skill guys for LSU, Blake, had a pretty good day.
Carter, does LSU have the best offensive line in the country?
Yeah, but I think this is the best LSU offensive line that I've seen. I really do think this group is going to be that good.
Are they the best in the country?
Yeah, I would say that. I mean, obviously, every year we know Kirby's going to have a good offensive line at Georgia.
They dominated on Saturday, by the way.
Yeah, and look, there are plenty of other great LSU offensive lines. 2019's offensive line, 2007 offensive line. I mean, there's plenty of good ones. I just think this is the best one I've personally seen. And your big performer was DJ Chester. He was really good.
Fantastic.
All the snaps are on the money. No wild snaps, really, that I can remember. I missed some in the second half, but
he needs to take a little bit of the heat off, because he's tipping off if it's a run or pass, because if it's a run, he's getting out a little bit quicker, a little bit harder.
That's what I came here for, so I can hear that.
Yeah, when it's a passing play, he's not getting it back there as fast. So look, that's something that he's got to, like, Brad can't tell him that, because he's got to pick that. That's got to be up on his own. But as someone who played that position religiously, he's got to take some heat off those run play snaps.
But I feel a lot better when you were saying, hey, he looks pretty good. And,
looks phenomenal. I mean, Jacoby and Guillory, I mean, with all due respect to that young man, DJ Chester's numbers imprinted in his chest. I mean, Carter. I mean, the long run by Caleb Jackson, and this isn't the first time. I mean, like we broke things down on our scrimmages, or the first 2 scrimmages they had on those Saturdays. It's not the first time that these running backs have run wide open. Carter, they're running different things schematically, like the power that you saw, or the counter when the guard and tackle would pull. I love what they're doing with the running game, man. I love this. I love that they're being dynamic. And because not only are they being dynamic, they got the dudes that can be dynamic. And you know what happens when you're not having to just do zone blocking schemes, and you have a pull, and you can pull, and you run power and counter. That defensive end's not going to be crashing in the way that he used to, because he's going to get cracked. So I think not only are they the best offensive line, but I got to give Joe Sloan and Brian Kelly a lot of credit. Yeah. The way that they're doing things and running the football. Carter, you made Josh Williams look like an All-American on Saturday to some extent. I mean, dude was breaking tackles. He was going untouched, even though he runs a 4.7. Yeah. I mean, he looked great.
Yeah, like the only thing that I would say is, like, I thought the run blocking wasn't the absolute worst. It wasn't the absolute best. Maybe mix up the sequencing of your runs. It looks like there were times where, the defense was just sitting and they kind of could see what was coming. But overall, that first team offensive line just looks really, really, really good. And the thing is, if that position group is exceptional, it can rise and lift everyone else up, even if there is a bit of a drop off in running back depth, even if you don't have Malik and BTJ out there, and you have, a new first time quarterback replacing one of the best Heisman quarterback seasons we've ever seen. So I think this offensive line is really going to carry LSU to some victories next year.
I know you hate me when I say this, but
No.
they got to slow it down. If you can run the ball like that and play, because here's my theory. You ready? My theory would be if you slow it down, I'm not saying a lot. I'm not saying going less miles slow. If you did have drives where you slowed some things down, I think Blake Baker, with enough time on the sideline with his guys, can make the adjustments to where you can get stops. And Carter, if you can make stops, you can get the same amount of possessions, right? Like it's just mathematically possible. So I do think that you can lean on teams. Like I think that you can lean on USC, and when you get in a crunch, you can really just overpower them running the football, which gives me hope that you can win. Defense is a whole different thing. But I do think that they're the best offensive line in the country, and I think you have fixed one side of the line of scrimmage where the other one is abysmal. Now, let me ask you the big elephant in the room. Are we making too much of this offensive line because of how bad the defense is?
I was thinking that when I was watching them this weekend, Blake, but I would say no because they were mostly elite last year. Now, does it help that you're going up against this defensive line? Yeah, it does, and there's no doubt about that. But honestly, I'm still very bullish on this group, and hopefully they live up to my lofty expectations. I'm not one to say greatest of all time too often, but I think they're going to be very special next year.
All right, one last position group before I get your breakout players and get you out of here on offense. Yeah. What were your thoughts on Caleb Jackson, Josh Williams in the running game?
Yeah, Josh had a very impressive blitz pickup on Perk, and we couldn't get the comeback from Ricky to Kyren on a third and whatever it was. Josh is just a very good player. I mean, he probably won't get drafted. He probably won't be all SEC, but this guy has been in 2-minute drills since 2020. I mean, he was on the field for the Marco Wilson shoe throw. He has a 2019 LSU national championship ring, and he's the heart and soul of this team. And he's
got to be your number 18.
Yeah, I that's where I would go. I would go. I mean, there's always a few other candidates, but it's got to go in that direction. But I also think Caleb did really well. Obviously housing that football was very impressive. And obviously the next step is just becoming a more well-rounded back. And look, part of it for him next year is going to be how much can Caden Durham cut into their carries if he is ready to go as a true freshman, which I think he will be. But yeah, Caleb has the clearest route to the workhorse role that we've seen at the LSU running back position in quite some time, and hopefully he delivers.
You think he can have a Clyde type impact?
Not quite, because Clyde never really left the field, after that Texas game and after, Leonard Fournette left the team. It just became the Clyde show. I think Josh gives you just too much as a personal protector and big moment guy that you want him out there in those 2-minute drill situations. But as an actual modern day running back, yes, I think he will have a 60-40 work share with Josh next year with some Caden Durham split in there as well.
All right. Who are some of your breakout guys offensively not named Garrett Nussmeier? And let me say this too, not named Kyren Lacey.
Yeah, so let's go Kamarion Pimpton. I was very excited to see some of the things he was able to do. Now, everyone knows Mason Taylor is an absolute beast. He was the number one run blocking tight end in the SEC last year per PFF. I would like to see, and this has probably happened. Obviously, I'm not privy to every last bit of information, but I would like to see Kamarion Pimpton get some more run with the ones, not over Mason Taylor, because Mason is the best tight end on the team, and there is a gap between him and everyone else. But Pimpton gives you something as a pass catcher, and I would like to see him get more reps just to see him develop into a player. Because Trey'Dez Green is coming, and he wants to be a part of the tight end room, or he could just be a big receiver on the outside. So Kamarion Pimpton, definitely that guy for me offensively, because he did some really good things on Saturday.
Anybody else?
Yeah, Blake. One guy defensively, I thought that did some good things was Parrish. He had some ups and downs last year. And look, that defensive end room has a lot of bodies in there. It has Zavion Jones in there. It has Deshaun Womack in there. It has now a rising Gabriel Relaford. But, Parrish has obviously been around the block. He's one of the older guys in that room. And I thought he did some good things over the weekend. And I thought Ashton Stamps had a few good moments this weekend as well with Zy Alexander getting back healthy. And, I think Zy will start next year. But Stamps and Woodland and maybe a few others are going to push for some playing time.
I can't let you leave, but before asking you about Gabe Relaford.
Yeah, let's do it.
I don't want to overreact, but he had 2 sacks.
Yeah, and I think Gabe's really good. Athleticism wise, he is very gifted, right? He's a track and field athlete. He has some scheme versatility. When I spoke to him, he's pretty adamant on playing strong side in, but I think if push came to absolute shove, he could give you some 3-tech reps in a passing situation. So yeah, I like Gabe a lot. I've gotten to know a little bit about his family as well. Interviewed him a few weeks ago. I'm really excited about his prospects. Like Brian Kelly said, they're going to see if he could do it against some of the better players on this team, the Campbells and the Jones of the world. Also thought at the end, Kalash Cobbins had a really, really nasty swim move there. Once again, that was the backups, Colin Hurley reps. And of course, everyone's talking about Colin Hurley right now. I was very excited to see him as a guest on both of our programs do really good stuff. So really, really pumped up about that young man's future as well.
The only thing with Hurley, he threw it to a scholarship wide receiver on a 7th string walk on. So
yeah, of course.
But of all the 4 quarterbacks, him and Garrett Nussmeier spin it the best.
Yeah,
it's not even a question.
Yeah, and what's funny was I thought Swan actually had some good ball locations. I know he had to pick in the red zone portion, but yes, if you're just looking at them as throwers, Colin and Garrett are the best throwers on this team, and Colin Hurley is one of the youngest LSU football players ever. And what's crazy is he reclassified up. So, and he's still one of the youngest LSU football players ever. So even if he would have stayed in 2025, he still would have been very young for that class. And now he is very, very, very young at a position that requires the most mental aptitude in maybe all of sports. So really impressed with Colin. You could see he puts a lot of work in.
Yeah, Relaford almost got his 3rd sack. If Hurley wouldn't have let that thing go, Hurley just said, "Screw it, I'm throwing it down there somewhere."
Yeah, that was. I actually thought Gabe was going to play in him. I'm glad he didn't.
Well, the quarterbacks that don't have the red jerseys can be hit.
Yeah, that's I feared for Colin's life.
Well, I'm glad they did, because it showed that he actually can make the throw with somebody in his face.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm really, really excited about some of the youth on this team because Blake, it's like you said a minute ago, and like you said on your channel, it's don't just play experienced players just because they're experienced, right? You obviously need to give Blake Baker some time because we've seen him do big transformations with players at Missouri, and then obviously famously at LSU with Damon Clark, but.
Who was with Blake Baker all day on Saturday. Was on the sideline standing right next to Blake Baker, by the way.
So the point here is we would like to think that the new coaching staff can come in and fix every single player, move them to this position, move them to that position, new coaching staff, new diet, new whatever. But not everyone takes leaps, right? Like, in fact, more players do not take leaps forward than do, right? Not everyone is Damon Clark. Not everyone is Cordell Flott, who made a massive leap in that final season, same season as Damon Clark. Every year there's one or two, but not every single one of them can do it. So there comes a time where you have to say, well, maybe we should just play the young guys, and maybe that group is special, and then you'll see if you for real have something on your roster at all.
Carter, the Power Bryant.
We'll see you, man. Congrats. You're over 1,000 shows, right?
No, we're at 916.
916. Okay, so I was on show 900. Yeah, and we got 1,000.
How crazy is it, man? It feels. I don't even feel like it's been 2 weeks.